Hi, I'm Brett Simons from the band Chicago, and you are watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you from behind backstage at the Chicago REO Speedwagon concert. If you listen really carefully, you can hear REO banging away. We're right behind backstage. Well, we're here with Chicago band bass player Brett Simons. What's happening, Brett?
How you doing?
I'm doing well. This is an honor. I feel like I'm completing filling in the dots here. I interviewed Peter Cetera a while ago. I interviewed Jason Sheff, as a matter of fact, at this venue. But we're smart this time because we're doing it before the show where there's plenty of daylight.
Beautiful out today.
We did. It is beautiful. We did the interview with Jason. I don't know if I should say this to everybody, but we were the only place we can find with adequate lighting was in the bathroom of his dressing room. So if you check out our interview with Jason Sheff on ForBassPlayersOnly.com, that's where we were, and it worked out fine. But
makes for some good acoustics in a bathroom.
yeah, that wasn't bad either. But you know what? You got to do what you got to do. But let's talk about you. You've had the gig for a while now.
Yeah, I came in, got the call late 2017.
Okay.
And kind of started falling into place in January this year, and have been kicking on since. It's been great.
Well, great. Let's back up a little bit and talk about your musical upbringing. You're from somewhere in Indiana, right?
Yeah, I was actually born in Gary, and
Grew up down the street from the Jacksons, right?
yeah, had some friends.
You and Michael were buddies, right?
Gary, Indiana,
There you
Gary, Indiana. And I kind of grew up in Chesterton, Indiana. Went to a great school system there, Duneland School Corporation, which was known for its marching bands. I guess we kicked butt often in state. And
Did you play an instrument that allowed you to be in the marching
It's
band?
funny you mention that.
Like Woody Allen playing the cello in the marching band in the movie Take the Money and Run. Did you ever see that?
I have
That's
seen that.
classic.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. That's a crazy one. But my friend was a drum major. He remains one of my best friends from my hometown, who actually lives in Los Angeles. Ron Jubal is a saxophone player and teacher at MI, the Chesterton High School Jazz Band actually was known to have a bassist in the band. And there was an amp pusher. There was actually an assigned amp pusher. They had two 12-volt batteries, I think, with a step-up transformer that powered a big PV amp. But alas, I didn't dive so deeply where I got into the marching band world. I stayed comfortably in orchestra, string orchestra, and
I'm sorry, I'm just chuckling. An amp pusher.
it's amazing. It was amazing that we had it. And I think the guy's name was Mike Tucker.
Oh, Mike Tucker, the amp pusher?
No, he was the bassist though. But he was kind of I idolized him as a freshman because he was in the jazz band, and that kept me from getting in the jazz band. But we had such a substantial music program at Chesterton High School that there was actually a lab band.
Okay.
So, and I owe a lot to that lab band experience, and particularly Mr. Al Castronovo, who was the director of the program and of the Chesterton High School marching band, because he encouraged me to stay in the lab band, stay the course, learn how to read. You know, I had my head in the clouds. I'd been rocking out outside of school, so when I came in as a freshman, I didn't really want to be a band geek. I wanted to be a rock star.
But you do not come from a musical family, is that correct?
Not particularly. I mean, we had some cool vinyls in the house, but no, it wasn't a household where music was flowing. There weren't instruments all over the place, and of no fault of my parents, but it just wasn't their direction. In fact, there aren't all that many musical genes in my genealogy, from what I found. I don't know. Maybe there's more research to be done, but
Maybe you'll start something here.
yeah, maybe there's some secret ancestor that was Paganini's brother or something.
Possibly.
Maybe Paganini himself.
There you go. I used to play Moto Perpetuo on the 5-string electric bass.
Yeah, that's a good age. That's good stuff to play.
Great. I hate to sound degrading to that wonderful piece of music, but it's a great finger exercise for both hands.
Yeah, there's a lot of classical music that's like that.
But it seems to me I saw or read somewhere that you were handed a guitar, but the top two strings were missing. So you were kind of indoctrinated to.
Yeah, maybe from an older bio. It's either that or I broke them because I was bending them too much. But that guitar was a loaner from some of my pals, Kevin Wilson and Rob Watson. They were great guys. and they both had great guitars. I think Kevin had this great late 60s, early 70s Les Paul, but it was the SG Les Paul, you know, and whatever other instruments we had. But I didn't have an instrument, so I kind of got that acoustic guitar as a loner. Either broke the top 2 strings or ended up with the bottom 4 strings, and they already had guitars, and they were don't buy a guitar. We're 2 guitars. Let's get you playing bass, and immediately started gravitating toward that. And kind of looking back from there, I realized, I always used to, not thinking about the bass, I realized I always used to gravitate to listening to that and really enjoyed that. So right when that was kind of a eureka moment for me, where it's like, wow, what have I been missing out on all this time? And just immediately started playing bass and totally loving it. And very quickly graduated from a rock band, kind of trailer park rock band, got into high school, opened up new avenues, and just went on to other worlds from all the rock stuff I was learning into jazz and classical stuff.
Well, so eventually upright bass too, right?
Yeah, I think it was when I was a freshman in high school when I started orchestra. Again, with the encouragement of Al Castronovo, said, let's get you on upright.
So you studied formally and with the bow and Samandel and all that?
It was like, our bass section had 4 great bassists. I was in 4th chair at the time. And there's a fellow student, I think he was maybe 3 or 4 years my senior, Dave Williams, who was kind of my conduit to all things bass. I owe a lot to my early nurturing in the bass world to him. And through that, there was never formal training. Just, I started playing French bow and just got the basic technique, basic positions, but was largely self-taught specifically on my instrument through high school. I think I may have had one formal sit-down lesson. Otherwise, it just came from being in these ensembles and learning from my peers. And then from there, applied to a few universities and ended up at University of Miami.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Alum.
That's right.
It's funny because I was being a resident of Indiana. I outside of auditioning and doing well on the audition and all the state grants, I was able to go to IU for a full ride. And I was so close because David Baker was there.
David Baker, yeah, and Murray Grodner and Stuart Sankey were the bass teachers.
Gotcha. I wasn't that deep in to know who the bass instructors were, but I would have known that.
Edgar Meyer went there.
Meyer, that's right, he did. Kenny Aronoff is in the drummer world.
I didn't know that.
Great musicians came through IU.
I almost went there. I was blown away. I said, wow, 5 orchestras, 90 people in each orchestra. The kids learn their parts. I was ready to go, and I was looking at a whole bunch of different schools. You mentioned MI. I looked at that. I looked at Berkeley, even though at the time it was strictly an undergraduate college, and I was looking for a graduate degree. I looked at Eastman School of Music and North Texas State, all great schools. Something about Miami just hit the spot with me, and I said, wait a minute, this is what I started out looking for in the first place. Don Kaufman, the electric bass teacher, Dr. Lucas Drew, the classical. So it was great. Tell me about your experience in Miami.
Well, there was so much offer, I guess, like you're alluding to. It was the right choice at the end. I would love to have gone to IU, or CCM was another university that I applied to and was accepted to. But
I used to have a hockey stick that said CCM.
I bet it didn't. What does that mean? It's not College Conservatory of Music, obviously.
I don't think so. I don't know, getting off on a tangent.
That's
we just missed each other in Miami. I left and then you came right after me.
I came in 87 or 88. I don't remember exactly.
And I came after Mark Egan and Will Lee and, way after Pat Metheny and those guys.
Lineage at school.
I was there during the Sound Machine guys. Were my contemporaries, my buddies.
Great musicians all. Yeah, but it was a really rich experience. When
I knew John Cicada, he was Juan Cicada.
Exactly, as did I. He actually ended up, I played with him a few times down there, and he ended up becoming a faculty member, I think, or he started teaching at the school, the vocal ensemble.
Really?
I know he went there. I think he came back and did seminars or something like that. But what a great musician. Have a lot of friends, mutual friends that have worked with John and the whole Miami Sound Machine.
But I had such a great experience in Miami, and in reading your bio, I see we did kind of a lot of similar things. And I was the house bassist at the Hirschfeld Theater, so I'd play 8 shows a week there, and then head over to Little Havana and play at the Copacabana or the Latin clubs. Those shows started like 1:30 or 2 in the morning. But one name that caught my eye when seeing all I know you played with the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson and Melissa Etheridge, and you did a lot of Irish music, I saw. but there was a name that struck me, Roberto Pereira. I played with him when he was first coming up, and we did a show. Do you remember the show Sábado Gigante?
Yeah, Gigante.
That was a big show. Well, I played on that show with him in those. So you played on a few albums with him?
Yeah, I did. I forgot. Well, I've just recollected now. I think it was Olben Burgos, great drummer, who you probably know.
Yeah, I remember him.
Ended up with the Sound Machine, but he's such an amazing drummer, and I think he'd already been working with Roberto, and I had been doing some stuff at the university with him, like some senior recitals or whatever, some local gigs, and somehow or another I got recommended to play with Roberto after Steve Bailey, who recorded his debut record on Epic, I think. He left or whatever.
I was learning Steve's lines when I played on Sábado Gigante.
So I must have come in right after you, because that was when I was late freshman year. I felt so lucky to be a freshman and then again exposed to all that Miami had to offer, and then end up on a cool gig like this with such key players. But I think Olben was the liaison, and I ended up. Roberto was very open to the group that he had, and I ended up co-producing that next record.
That's right.
And I'm 21 years old at Criteria, kind of being allowed to, having the trust amongst the band to make arrangement, suggestions and whatnot, and it was really, really cool. I really enjoyed my time with Roberto.
I remember that the Pope came to visit Miami around those years.
And Roberto played. I remember that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
He said that's a special gig, and he says, the White House, I think I mentioned the White House. He says, yeah, that will come. But the Pope, he was like in a small dining room with a very small group of people, the Pope and the immediate entourage, whatever, and that was such a tremendous honor for him that he felt, as it should be.
I remember something of that, but not the specifics. So that's a cool memory. Very cool.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about what's going on now. Chicago, you've been with since late 2017. I guess let me ask you first about the bass lines. Are you free to come up with any of your own, or are you expected to follow what Peter did or Jason did or any of your predecessors?
That's a great question. The truth is, the guys have never made a request to me. So whether it's because I learned the stuff faithfully, I dug very deeply in to this music and this repertoire, and learned so much, frankly, along the way. Whether it's because I just dug so deeply into it, or they want us to be ourselves, I don't know. But I do know that I'm honoring a lot of the lines that Peter, had created over the years, and then being myself. And I guess the being myself part is getting smiles. So I feel really great about that. But I have to tell you, especially because this year in general, we're honoring the 50th anniversary of Chicago 2 in its entirety. Wow. And then we take a short break or a short intermission and then do a hit set. And in learning Chicago,
there were plenty of hits on Chicago too, as I recall.
There were. A lot of people are like wanting to hear like only hits, but they're kind of blended in, like on the.
You're talking about later hits like Saturday in the Park, and from 5, I think.
That was actually, I think that's off of CTA, Saturday in the Park.
Okay.
Or maybe
you would know.
Oh, good. I'm not a walking historian here.
Yeah.
I still have a lot of music going through my head.
Yeah.
But in learning Chicago 2, I really dug into the specifics of Peter's lines, and I honestly, I'd never really looked at him as a bassist, because I didn't dig into I wasn't hip to exactly what was going on in a lot of that music. I knew that it was so melodic that I didn't dig into the rhythm section playing, because there was so much going on. It was kind of this murmur. But once you pick it apart, wow, Peter was doing some intense shit. And I want to say, Peter, thank you. I can't wait to meet you, because that was some really amazing creative stuff back then. And how he and Danny were playing, and Danny was kind of pushing it like in a Buddy Rich kind of way, and Peter really kind of just sat right on it, so there was this like push and pull that was really, it made for some really powerful and energetic music.
Yeah. Once again, it was great interviewing him. It was a phone interview, so I didn't get to meet him face to face, but you can check out that interview with Peter Cetera on forBassPlayersOnly.com. It was a good one. There was a picture of you on the Chicago website, I think, somewhere. I wanted to ask you about your technique. You happen to be holding a pick. Is that a big part of your playing technique?
As is needed. I love it all. I mean, when I was growing up, I played a bit of pick, played a guitar. I play guitar as well. Love playing with my fingers. Pizzicato, a percussionist Ray, just walked by.
Oh.
Love him.
Wilfredo Reyes.
That's Ray Islas, and Wilfredo Reyes Jr. plays drums.
We got pretty good at with our Spanish accents in Miami, didn't we?
Puerco en mierda, as they translated.
I know what puerco means. Pig and got it.
Yeah. Because playing with these guys, it's just like, oh my God, loving it. I play with a pick, and obviously I don't know in exact detail how much Peter played with or without a pick or pizzicato, but I know there was some pick playing, and I love playing with the pick. So I have a P bass with round ones and a P bass with flat ones and a 5-string bass with round ones. So
what kind of bass is the 5-string?
That's a Fender too, a Fender Elite that I got this year. While we're on that subject, the Fender P bass just came out this year at NAMM. It's the Fender American Original 60s P bass, and I'm in love with it. Highly recommend this instrument, and so stoked to be playing it every night. But yeah, it depends on the tune. I've gotten I've been hip to some of what Peter's done, and then maybe I'll change it because some of that early stuff had so much attack on it.
Yes.
Whether it was his fingers or just dead strings that he had the high end up on. Where you can hear more of the finger noise, I don't know, but the pick works on some tunes. And
tell me about the rest of your gear. Any other basses that you didn't mention first?
On tour with me, no. I'm playing basically Fender on this gig, and it suits the music perfectly. Again, the Fender American Original. I have a 70s Fender P bass that was a really cool instrument because it was given to me by Brian Wilson when I was on tour with Brian. It was something I found in our storage locker in Burbank, kind of sitting haphazardly in the corner. It hadn't been used for many years, so I just inquired about it.
Sorry to interject, but when did you do that? Because I interviewed Bob, how do you pronounce it, Lizik?
Bob Lizik.
Lizik. Sorry, Bob.
Chicago.
Yes.
He's an old pal from Chicago.
Well, I thought he'd been with Brian Wilson for a long time.
Had been for a long time. I think he came in when that whole Chicago contingent started playing with Brian, when Brian kind of partially relocated to Chicago. There's a big group of Chicago musicians that played with him, and then remained faithful to a lot of those guys over the years. Bob was there, and then he and the drummer got busy doing other stuff in Chicago, whatever. They did a lot of jingle work in the past.
Very nice guy, very friendly guy.
Awesome, and sick musician too. He was a kind of a session mentor when I was living in Chicago to me.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Did I see Warwick as one of on your list of arsenal of basses?
I've been a huge fan of Warwick, and I've used them as loaners mainly. From Warwick, both in the States and in Germany when I've toured over there. But I have yet to own one, but I love the instruments. I think we talked a little bit about this on our personal phone call about the Star Bass, and I fell in love with that instrument.
Star Bass. Lee Sklar and Rex Brown and Josh Paul.
A lot of great players playing that instrument.
Yes. What about strings?
Strings, never been too picky. I've tried a lot of stuff, and I use a lot of stuff. For a long time, I was a devout DR user, especially on like my Fender basses. The stainless were great. The way I'm playing now, stainless isn't working as well, and I started using Dunlop, and all my friends at Dunlop have been really great with me about the strings. I've also used some Diodario stuff. Right now on the newer American Original P bass, I have Diodarios on there that just seem to work on that instrument. I have an old set of DR flats on the Brian Wilson P bass, and I think I have Dunlop stainless steel 5s on the Fender Elite 5-string.
How many basses do you carry with you on this tour?
Again, this tour it's just those 3, the 5 and the 2 4-strings, and we're an ampless stage, so
becoming more prevalent.
I guess, yeah, and in louder and bigger sheds like this, amps are fun for the artists on stage, but I understand. It makes the front of house guy's job more challenging, so I don't mind it. And we have such a great monitor engineer that I feel right at home in my in-ear mix. But when I learned that it was a DI gig, I was quick to assemble what I'm calling an amp board, and the cornerstone of that is this amp simulation box. It's made for guitar by the guys at Atomic.
Okay.
It's called the Amplifier box, and my pal, old touring pal and longtime pal, Pete Thorne, hit me to that. Pete does a great web channel. He's got a great YouTube channel about all things guitar, especially pedals. And I immediately called him up and I said, "Is there something that's not a rack mount that I can put on a pedal board. And he said, 2 weeks ago I just reviewed this pedal. Check this out, and it worked great. He has these impulse responses, IRs for speaker cabinets and power amps.
Cool.
So that's kind of the back end of it, and then I run through an EBS compressor. Just hit that. And
Swedish company.
yeah, great guys over there.
Yeah, Ralph
Ralph.
Björd. How do you
Björd.
pronounce Ralph's there? Björd. I'm sorry, Ralph.
Yeah, thank you. I'd have to look at it and write it again. I haven't spoken.
BJU
or something like that. Yeah. Something.
Björbo, I think.
Ralph, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Ralph.
We're gonna straighten this out after this.
How do you spell EBS?
But I have that the Dynacomp up front. Basses hit that, and then one goes to the Clean DI to the front of house, and then the other goes the through from that goes to this really interesting box that my friend John Button introduced me to from the 2018 Winter NAMM. He knew
I like John Button because he spells John Jon, like
yes,
I do.
like you. The John and John show.
There you go.
But he introduced me to this pedal. It's like a kind of a bona fide preamp amp stage in a pedal form, made by this guy in Israel. I think he used to live in North Hollywood. It's called Metalhead Electronics, and I think his independent this particular line is called the Elan. So I have the Elan 5, I think it is, bass preamps. It's a tube preamp it's really interesting. And so it goes.
That's a Hebrew name or a Hebrew word, Elan.
Yeah,
It is.
it is totally.
That's right.
And I wasn't sure if that was an acronym, but that after being in touch with him, he was knowing his name and everything.
Now there's a restaurant in London that my wife and I like a lot. That's run by a guy from Israel. It's called Nopi, N-O-P-I. And I'm taking Hebrew words backwards and inside out, and I just couldn't figure it out. I asked the waitress, "What is Nopi?" "Oh, north of Piccadilly."
So it was indeed an acronym. You're trying to that. When I saw the way he writes Elan, it looked like it was going to set up as an acronym, but of course it's his first name. But a really cool box.
Cool.
It's worth checking out because it's not out there that much in the bass world. I think it's a newer product, and he's trying to get it out there. But
We will check it out. What about the future, Brett? What else? This is the last night of this tour, right?
We're in Detroit. This is the last night of a month-long run, and the last night of our co-headline with REO Speedwagon. I'm going to miss the guys. I've gained some really great friends in the band and crew, just world-class cats through and through.
So what's in store for you personally?
Kind of outside of my musical life of doing sessions and live gigs when I'm available back home.
Which is where? L.A.?
Los Angeles. Yeah, I live in Los Angeles. I spent a little bit of time in Nashville as well, but Los Angeles is bona fide home and has been for the last 18 years.
So you know how to pronounce Demumbrian, right?
Denumbrium.
Demumbrian.
That's almost like right. When I first see that, it was kind of like seeing Sepulveda. When you first get to LA, it's Sepulveda,
Sepulveda.
Capoeira.
That's right.
Yeah,
Demumbrian, the street in Nashville.
Those often misunderstood street names that you acclimatize to once you're there in the city for a while.
Is there anything? I mean, you've done an awful lot, and you got such an early start. Is there anything else in your musical career that you've always wanted to do that just haven't gotten around to yet?
Well, it might, by documenting this indelibly, it might put the pressure on me, but I need to make some kind of solo work. I have so many song ideas and compositional starts, and it's something I've wanted to do since I was in college, but somehow never. I've had my hand in a lot of projects where I'm an integral part of bands and whatnot and musical entities, but I haven't done a Brett Simons album, so that might be something.
I get that answer a lot from bass players because the bass is traditionally a supportive instrument. I don't want to say a background instrument because that's not really the way we think of ourselves, but I wrote a blog about that actually. It was after an interview with Tim Landers, and that inspired me. But I get that answer a lot, and the reason I bring that up is just to encourage you to do it, because I'm sure you have a lot that you want to say and express yourself. And please let us know when that happens, and we will impart that information to our audience here. Last question, Brett. What would you be if you weren't a bass player? Something outside of music.
Ooh, well, I guess that would kind of embellish the last question of how to, what's in the future for you. Obviously, I look forward to a lot more work with Chicago and enjoy this music and looking forward to getting to know it even better. But in my downtime, I do a lot of building. I rebuilt or refurbished a couple houses in Nashville. Those were more investment than a project. But I've built a few motorcycles, and I've built my studio, and I'm a tinkerer. I think at the end of the day, if I stopped playing music, I'd probably go back to school for architecture, because I love building, and that would be the amalgam of all the technical things that I'm into. And I love structures, so I'd probably be an architect.
You're an interesting guy. Well, you
I
might
wouldn't go that far, buddy.
You could go to architecture school someday, but promise us all you won't stop playing music.
I hope to never stop playing music. I really enjoy it, and I feel very lucky that I've been able to lead a winding path as a chameleonic musician. I'm pretty much a chameleon as far as styles and what have you, and I feel very lucky that I'm able to do what I love doing.
And there's a lot more that we could talk about, but we need to leave it at that. But maybe we'll do a follow-up interview. I'm a little intrigued about all this Irish music that you played in Chicago, and I never thought of Jennifer Love Hewitt or Minnie Driver as musically oriented people with acts, and I know you've done some stuff with them, so let's make a list of what we want to talk about next time.
Sounds great.
In the meantime, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us. Good luck with the rest of the tour, which is one more set or two more sets, a flight home. Yeah.
2 more sets and a flight home.
All right. We'll keep doing what you're doing. We'll keep enjoying it.
Appreciate you.
On location backstage in, where are we? Clarkston, Michigan, at the DTE Music Theater, but we still call it
Pine Knob.
Pine Knob. There you go. With our good friend Brett Simons. I'm John Liebman. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.